Dear colleague, welcome. It's Dr. Jack with today's Life Brief, and this one is called Stress versus Kindness. And since this is Valentine's Day month, I'm covering all topics related to love. So let me start off with kindness and what it means. When you look up kindness in the dictionary, or just consider it for yourself, the words that come up are generosity, affection, compassion, warmth, consideration. So when you think about these words, especially like generosity, it means that the person who is kind has a fund of internal resources, including positive emotion, that they can spend on really taking care of another person, taking another person's perspective. Conversely, a person who is depleted, they are hunkered down. Their perspective is narrowed. They're focused on survival and on suffering through, just getting through whatever problem or dilemma or challenge they're facing. They don't have the internal resources to be looking at the big picture, let alone considering, worrying about another person's perspective. So if you ever find yourself being uncharacteristically unkind, that's a good indication that you are under stress, that you are depleted. Again, I said uncharacteristically. That means a change has occurred. So since we're clinicians, even if you find yourself ever just not caring as much about your patients, that's a good indication of stress that may lead to burnout. So, let me share with you the way I see stress, and that will lead us to how to resolve it. So, I see stress as being due to a gap between what we believe the world demands of us and what we believe our capacities are. We believe, in other words, that the world wants so much from us that we're unable to deliver it. And when this occurs repeatedly and chronically, we then live with stress. So there are 4 stress gaps I'd like to share with you. The first one is the time stress gap. This is where you have so many tasks to complete, both in your personal life, in your career, that you simply do not have the time to complete them all. You have chronic time hunger. Another stress gap is the control stress gap. This is where you feel like you have a high level of responsibility but limited control. Again, this is very important for us clinicians because we often feel very responsible for our patient's outcome, while at the same time realizing that our ability to control our patients, what they think, what they feel, what they do, is limited. And this occurs repeatedly, chronically with our patients, and so we can have this chronic control stress gap. Another stress gap is the competence stress gap, also very common among us clinicians. This occurs when we are confronted with problems that are so complex and intractable that we simply feel we don't have the knowledge or the skills to really resolve them. We kind of feel we're just treading water. And another 4th stress gap is the expectation stress gap. This occurs when you have certain expectations for yourself, again, in terms of your life, your career, personal life, and those expectations are not being fulfilled. And this usually occurs in conditions where you've tried repeatedly to meet those expectations and for whatever reason fallen short. Now, certainly there are other stress gaps, and I encourage you to think about what stress gaps you may have in your life. But let me tell you why specifically I'm bringing up these stress gaps. Because I very, very strongly believe that the best way to arrive at a solution is to really define the problem in detail, to really understand the source, the core of a problem. So this is what I'd like to ask you to do if you feel like you have too much stress in your life. So look at what are those sources. What kind of stress gaps perhaps might you have in your life? For example, a common time stress gap that we clinicians face is related to our work. It's hard to get our work day over with and everything completed. And a lot of that has to do with charting. So if you're able to identify that indeed the time stress gap is a source of stress for you, and more particularly, the problems in note-taking and getting that done in a timely way, then you've gotten at least halfway through to solving your problem. Now the solution becomes straightforward. Not easy, but straightforward. You know exactly what needs to change. You need to develop a way of taking better notes faster. Again, that's not easy. You have a whole career's worth of taking notes in a certain way. But now you've identified what you need to do, so you can research and then practice more efficient and effective ways of taking your notes for the medical record. There's one more thing I want to bring up before we part, and that has to do with the fact that if a person's been under chronic stress, they may have developed thinking and behavioral patterns in which they are displaying lacks of kindness or even frank unkindness. And again, this arises because a person under stress is just hunkered down. The last thing they can really do is spend more effort worrying about other person's point of view and how their own behavior may impact that other person. But when this occurs chronically, certain behavioral patterns can arise. So once you deal with any sources of your stress and come up with solutions that you then implement and practice, and you're successful in decreasing those sources of stress, that's really when you can open up your perspective. You can look at the bigger picture, including your life and your expectations and your goals and your values, and also how your behaviors impact other people. Then when you have that fund of internal resources, you can spend some of that on yourself and on other people. So that's my thought for this week. This is Dr. Jack signing off. You take care of yourself. Thank you.